I never believed the past had claws sharp enough to reach through time and tear into the present, but when I opened the cardboard box that once belonged to my sister, I felt those claws dig into me, dragging me back into a darkness I thought I had escaped. The night had been long, my office dim, papers stacked high around me, the city's glow pressing against the tall glass windows. I had stayed late, as I often did, poring through case notes that felt less like law and more like fractured morality. When I finally decided to confront the one thing I had avoided for months, a box delivered after my sister's death, marked with her handwriting, the curves of her letters unmistakable, haunting, and too alive for someone now buried. Her name was Rachel Vale, and though she was younger, she had always been braver. She worked as an investigative journalist, and she thrived on walking directly into the fire while I, the older sister, stood in the shadows of the courtroom trying to pull truth from men who lied with polished shoes and sharpened smiles. When she was murdered, the official report claimed it was a mugging, random, tragic, and unsolvable, but I knew better. I could feel it in the way the detectives avoided my eyes, the way the file closed too quickly, the way the silence around her case screamed louder than any courtroom argument I had ever given. I buried the box in my office closet and tried to bury my rage with it, but rage doesn't bury. It burns. That night, I cut the tape and pulled the lid open. Inside, scattered between notebooks and half-filled coffee-stained folders, was a leather-bound file, cracked at the edges, its cover marked with something dark and rust-colored that looked too much like dried blood. My breath froze as I opened it, and I saw rows of handwritten names, one after the other, meticulously inked in my sister's sharp script. Judges, attorneys, politicians, crime bosses, even a police captain I recognized. Every name connected in a way I didn't yet understand. At first, I thought it was just her notes for an investigation, but then I saw the words scrawled at the top of the first page, underlined 3 times, its letters jagged, ledger. I flipped through page after page, and the names grew darker, heavier. Each one had a date next to it, but not birth dates or court dates. No, these were endings, dates of deaths, disappearances, or sudden resignations that had been whispered about in the city but never confirmed. My stomach churned as I realized what she had built. This wasn't a list, it was a record, a chronicle of power and silence, of people erased when they became inconvenient, of men and women who thought they were untouchable until they weren't. And then, in the middle of the ledger, I saw it, a name I couldn't breathe around. Rachel Vale, my sister's name, written in her own handwriting, followed by a blank date. She had written herself into this book before she died, as if she had known what was coming, as if she had accepted that the ledger would swallow her too. My chest constricted so tight I nearly tore the page, but I forced myself to keep reading. The names after hers were fewer, but sharper, like a knife's edge, and then, on the very last page, at the very bottom, written smaller than the others as though she had been afraid to finish the thought, was my own name, Catherine Vale. No date, not yet, but the ink looked fresh, darker than the rest. I dropped the ledger, my pulse hammering against my throat, my office suddenly colder, as if someone had opened a window I couldn't see. I locked the door, though I knew locks meant nothing to the kind of people who belonged in that book. My thoughts spiraled. How had she gotten this information? Who else knew she had it? Why had she kept it from me? And why had she written my name? The answers sat like shadows at the edges of the room, refusing to step into the light. I tried to steady my breathing and reached for her notebooks inside the box. They were filled with shorthand, sketches, maps of back alleys, diagrams of political structures, arrows connecting names like webs in a spider's nest. One word appeared again and again: silencers. I didn't know if it was a metaphor or a name, but I felt its weight. If Rachel had uncovered something this dangerous, she hadn't just been silenced, she had been erased, and now the same erasure was reaching for me. The sound of footsteps in the hall outside my office made me snap the ledger shut. It was late, too late for janitors, and I had locked the main floor hours ago. The footsteps stopped at my door, paused, then retreated. I didn't breathe until I heard the faint echo of the exit door closing. Someone had been listening. I slipped the ledger into my briefcase and gathered Rachel's notes, every page, every scrap, my hands shaking but precise. If they were watching, then I couldn't stay in the open. I left the office through the back stairwell and stepped into the city's midnight air, the skyscrapers rising like teeth, the streets too quiet, the silence unnatural. My car sat in the underground garage, and when I slid into the driver's seat, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, pale skin, dark hair falling loose, eyes bloodshot, but burning. I didn't see fear. I saw fury. Driving home, I remembered the last night I saw Rachel alive. She had come to my apartment, her hands trembling, her words rushed, her eyes darting to the windows as if shadows were listening. She had tried to tell me something, but all I caught was her whisper, "If they come for me, Cat, it won't stop with me." I had brushed it off, convinced it was another one of her dangerous obsessions. I had been wrong, deadly wrong. At home, I spread the pages across my table, covering it in a storm of ink and secrets. Threads connected names I knew from trials I had prosecuted, men who had walked free when evidence vanished, women who had disappeared from witness lists, cases that had haunted me because justice had slipped through my fingers like smoke. Rachel hadn't been chasing a story, she had been chasing a machine that fed on silence, on fear, on blood. The deeper I read, the clearer it became. This wasn't just corruption. It was orchestration. People in power had been protecting each other, eliminating threats, feeding names into the ledger like sacrifices to keep their empire clean. My hands clenched as I saw faces in my memory, men who had laughed at me in court, judges who had ruled against justice, lawyers who had sold their souls. They were all there, bound together by a ledger my sister had died for. And now, somehow, I was bound too. When the clock struck 3, exhaustion pulled at me, but I refused to close my eyes. That was when I noticed it, a small envelope tucked at the back of the ledger, sealed with wax, cracked at the edge. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, showing a group of men standing in front of a courthouse decades ago. On the back, in Rachel's handwriting, was a single sentence, "The beginning is the end." I didn't know what it meant, not yet, but I knew this: the people in that photograph were the architects of the ledger, and their legacy had spilled into my life like poison. If I didn't follow Rachel's trail, if I didn't find the truth, I would be next on the list. The city outside my window felt alive with eyes, watching, waiting. I traced my fingers over my name in the ledger, feeling the ink, the weight, the promise of violence. Rage rose in me like fire, burning away the fear, leaving only one truth: if they wanted to erase me, they would have to face me first. And in that moment, I swore to Rachel's ghost, to her silence, to her blood-stained file, I would not just survive this. I would tear their ledger apart, page by page, name by name. But I didn't yet realize the ledger wasn't just paper, it was alive, and it had already chosen me. The morning after discovering my name inside the ledger, I woke with the sense that the walls of my apartment were closing in on me. The air felt different, heavier, as if the city itself had shifted overnight. I hadn't slept, not really, only drifted into short bursts of shallow dreams where Rachel stood in the dark, whispering words I couldn't hear. When dawn came, I sat at my table staring at the ledger, its pages spread out like open wounds, daring me to move, daring me to act. The phone rang, a sharp sound that cut through the silence like a blade. I froze before answering, my instincts screaming, my hand trembling. On the other end, a voice I didn't recognize, calm, cold, male. "We know what you have, Ms. Vale. Return it, and you might still walk away." I tried to demand answers, to buy time, but the line went dead. My pulse thudded in my ears as I realized, they weren't asking, they were warning. I spent the next hour shredding through Rachel's notes, scanning for patterns, for a lead I could grab before the noose tightened. That was when I found her coded references to a storage facility downtown, a place she had marked with a red circle 3 times, underlined with the word archive. If Rachel had hidden anything, if she had left behind evidence beyond this ledger, it would be there. Driving through the city, I kept checking my mirrors, convinced I was being followed. The paranoia wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Twice I saw the same black sedan behind me, hanging back, keeping distance. I pulled into a crowded coffee shop, waited, watched as the car idled across the street before slipping away. They were watching, tracking, her enemies now mine. At the storage facility, I used Rachel's birthday as the access code, the lock beeping green as if her ghost had guided me. Inside her unit, stacked with boxes, I found another trove of files, photographs of crime scenes, transcripts of calls, secret memos stamped confidential that should never have left government hands. She had been building a case so massive it could have toppled pillars of the city's elite, and for that, she had been silenced. Among the boxes, one binder stood out, labeled Phase 2 in her handwriting. Inside were notes about a network of enforcers she called the silencers, hired killers, fixers, shadows that erased threats for the powerful. Her words described them like ghosts, no records, no photos, only whispers, but she believed they were real, and that they were tied directly to the ledger's names. Suddenly the lights in the unit flickered, and I heard footsteps outside. I killed my breathing, clutching the binder close, every instinct screaming that I wasn't alone. Through the narrow crack of the door I saw two shadows moving, too slow for workers, too sharp in their posture. They stopped outside my unit, and I held my breath as one of them jiggled the lock. For a moment I was sure it would snap open, but then a radio crackled faintly, and they walked on. I waited 10 minutes, then 20, before daring to move. Every second burned with fear, but when I finally slipped out, I clutched Rachel's binder like it was my lifeline, because it was. Back at my apartment, I laid out both the ledger and the binder, piecing together the pattern. I realized Rachel had been mapping not just corruption but succession. For every name that disappeared, another rose, like a grotesque inheritance of power. The ledger wasn't a list of victims, it was a blueprint for control. And my name at the end meant they weren't just cleaning loose ends, they were preparing to replace someone with me, or to erase me before I could interfere. That night, I called an old ally, Detective Marcus Hale, one of the few cops I still trusted. I told him nothing about the ledger, only that I needed a meeting off the books. He agreed, but his voice carried hesitation, and I wondered if even he could be trusted in a city this poisoned. The meeting spot was an old diner on the edge of downtown, neon buzzing faintly, the smell of grease heavy in the air. Marcus arrived in plain clothes, his eyes scanning the room before sitting across from me. "You look like hell, Cat," he muttered, sliding me a coffee. I told him Rachel's death wasn't random, that I had proof of something bigger, something lethal. His face darkened, his jaw tight. He said quietly, "Then you need to disappear before they make you disappear." But disappearing wasn't an option, not for me, not after Rachel. As we left the diner, headlights flared across the lot. A black sedan screeched forward, men in masks spilling out with weapons drawn. Marcus shoved me behind a car as gunfire cracked the night. My ears rang, glass shattered, chaos exploded. Marcus fired back, dropping one of them, but the others closed in fast. I grabbed a tire iron from the ground and swung with every ounce of fury, smashing into one man's arm, sending his gun skittering. Another lunged, but Marcus put him down with a shot that echoed like thunder. When the silence finally fell, 2 bodies bled on the pavement, the sedan peeled away, and Marcus pulled me to my feet, his face pale. "They're not just watching," he said, voice grim. "They're hunting you now." We fled before the sirens came, vanishing into the city's veins. My heart pounded, my body shook, but my mind sharpened. The hunt had begun, and I wasn't prey, I would make them bleed for every step they took toward me. Back in my apartment, I opened the ledger again, staring at my name, the ink dark as fresh blood. Rachel had tried to fight them alone, and it killed her. But I wasn't alone, not anymore. Marcus, the binder, the ledger, even Rachel's ghost, they were all with me now. I swore into the night, into the silence that felt alive around me. "You came for the wrong sister." And the war for the ledger had only just begun. The night after the attack at the diner, I knew there was no going back to ordinary life. The silencers weren't going to stop until the ledger was back in their hands, and until I was in the ground. I sat in my apartment surrounded by Rachel's notes, the binder, and the blood-stained ledger itself, the city humming outside like a predator breathing just beyond the glass. Sleep was impossible, every sound in the hallway a threat, every shadow against the wall a reminder that death was close, but fear had burned into something sharper, harder. I wasn't running anymore. I was hunting. Marcus insisted I move to a safe house he knew, a crumbling brownstone on the outskirts of the city where the neighbors minded their own business and the walls had no ears. From there we built our plan, piecing together Rachel's codes until a pattern emerged. She had been tracking not just names but locations, safe houses, hidden meeting spots where the architects of this network gathered. One name appeared again and again tied to these places, Elias Dorn, a retired judge whose reputation had always been spotless, almost saintly. Too spotless. Rachel's notes painted him as the ledger's keeper, the man who ensured the book survived from one generation of power to the next. If Elias was the keeper, then finding him meant finding the truth, and maybe, just maybe, a way to end it. Marcus and I tailed his routines, watching him from a distance. In public, Elias was fragile, white-haired, a man of quiet dignity feeding birds in the park. But when the sun fell, he shed the mask. We followed him to an abandoned courthouse downtown, its marble cracked, windows shattered, long forgotten by the city, or so it seemed. Inside, lights burned behind boarded doors, and silhouettes moved like restless phantoms. This wasn't abandonment, this was a nest. We planned to infiltrate, but the ledger had other plans. That night, when I returned to the safe house, I found a package waiting at the door, no postage, no markings, just a black envelope with my name written in neat strokes. Inside was a single page torn from the ledger, my name, Catherine Vale, written again, but this time, the date was filled in, tomorrow's. The message was clear. They weren't waiting. Rage eclipsed fear as I stared at the ink. They had marked me, but I wasn't going to let them write the ending. I loaded my gun, packed Rachel's binder, and told Marcus we moved tonight, no more waiting. If the ledger was alive, then I was going to carve my own line into its pages. We slipped into the courthouse after midnight, the city asleep, the building's halls echoing with the weight of secrets. Dust swirled under our boots, the scent of mold heavy, but deeper inside the air shifted, fresher, colder, carrying the faint hum of electricity. We followed the glow until we reached the main chamber, a courtroom long abandoned, now transformed into something monstrous. The benches had been replaced with rows of filing cabinets and shelves stacked with ledgers, hundreds of them, each leather-bound, each marked with symbols. Men in suits moved between them, silent, efficient, carrying documents like priests tending relics. And at the front, beneath the judge's bench, stood Elias Dorn, tall despite his age, his white hair gleaming, his hands resting on a cane that looked more like a scepter. His eyes lifted, and though he couldn't have seen us in the shadows, I felt him pierce me. "We've been expecting you, Ms. Vale," he said, his voice smooth, echoing through the chamber. The men stopped their movements, turning toward us, shadows of the silencers, their faces blank, their eyes sharp. Marcus tensed beside me, but I stepped forward, rage anchoring me against their weight. "You killed my sister," I spat, my voice trembling but loud. Elias smiled faintly, almost kindly. "Your sister wrote herself into the ledger. We simply turned the page. And now it's your turn." He gestured, and two silencers advanced. The fight exploded in an instant, Marcus firing, the sound shattering the silence, me swinging a chair into one man's skull, the chaos raw and furious. We battled through the chamber, blood on marble, the air thick with smoke from gunfire. But Elias never flinched, never moved, just watched as if it were theater, as if we were performing exactly what he expected. When the last silencer fell, gasping, Elias finally descended the bench, his cane tapping like a clock counting down. "Do you think killing them matters?" he asked softly. "The ledger does not die. It moves. It consumes. It has marked you because you belong to it now." I raised my gun, hand steady, the ledger's page with my name burning in my mind. "I don't belong to anything," I said, my finger tight on the trigger. But Elias only smiled, his eyes gleaming. "Then why did you come? Why pick up her work? Why bleed for it? You already chose. You already wrote yourself in." The words cut deeper than his men's blades. Because some part of me knew he was right. Rachel hadn't written my name, the ledger had, and now it was binding me. But rage burned hotter than fate. I fired, the bullet tearing through Elias's chest, his body collapsing onto the marble. For a moment, silence reigned, the chamber still, the ledgers watching. Then the shelves trembled, the books rattling, the air vibrating with a sound like whispers, thousands of whispers all at once. The ledgers opened on their own, pages flipping, names shifting, ink bleeding into new forms. And in that storm of paper and shadow, I saw Rachel's face, her eyes hollow, her lips mouthing words I couldn't hear. I staggered back, clutching the ledger I had brought, the original, the blood-stained one. Its pages writhed, alive, my name pulsing darker, brighter, as if the book itself demanded my surrender. Marcus shouted for me to run, but I couldn't. Not yet. I grabbed a gas canister from the corner, evidence of their rituals, accelerant for their silence, and hurled it across the shelves, my lighter sparking into flame. Fire roared to life, climbing fast, devouring the ledgers, the whispers twisting into screams. Marcus dragged me out as the courthouse burned, the night lit with fire, the city's skyline glowing red with secrets undone. We collapsed in the street, smoke staining our lungs, the world shaking behind us. I clutched the blood-stained ledger to my chest, knowing we hadn't destroyed it all, not completely, because the book in my arms still lived, still breathed, still bound me. Elias's words echoed in my skull, "You already chose." The fire raged behind us, but the ledger in my hands pulsed with heat, the ink shifting, my name growing darker, spreading like blood across the page. And in that moment I knew, this wasn't the end, it was only the beginning.